Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're Masechtas Yevamot daf Pei Beis. We are going to begin in the middle of Pei Aleph and Beis. We did see some of this already, but it's a continuation. So we're going to continue where it says My Chaticha Desanya. Chaticha Shel Chatos Tameya. Let's say you have a piece of a carbon chatos, but it's tameya, it's impure. And it got mixed up with meat which is tahar. Furthermore, we also have another situation. So too, a prusa sholechem apanim tameya. If again you have something which is tameh, this is the lechem apanim, and it's just arba b'meya pruso sholechem apanim. It's mixed up with other lechem apanim, taharos, which are tahar, then tala. The din is it's batal in this ratio. So if you have tami and tahar, which are mixed together, so it's batal. Rabbi Yehuda omer lo tala. Rabbi Yehuda says no, and this is because, as Rashi reminds us, that he holds in numerous places min b'mino is lo batal, because you have the same species, the same thing, meat and meat, or bread and bread, so they're not mavatal each other. Min b'mino, according to Yehuda, is not batal. So therefore, it doesn't matter what the ratio is, it's not going to work. Okay. So that's the ratio. And then it says as follows. What happens, let's say, of a chaticha shel chatas tahara, shenis arba b'mei chaticha shel chulin taharos. Let's say you have meat of kodshim, which is carbon chatas, but it's pure meat together with chulin meat. So everything is tahar, which means all this meat can be eaten by a kohen. Now, all the meat cannot be eaten by Yisrael because Yisrael can only eat chulin, cannot eat from a chatas. Only a kohen can. But technically, the reality is it shouldn't be a problem. Just give it all to a kohen. As we're saying, because even according to the Rabbanon, the Tanakama who said before that it was tala, that it is batal, that's only because it's something which otherwise cannot be eaten by anyone because it's tameh. So if it's mixed together in the proper ratios, then it's batal. However, here, as Rashi explained, as we saw yesterday, that any time we have the situation where it's tahar and tahar, but it's kodesh with chulin, so it's really not something which is necessary for it to become batal because a kohen is still allowed to eat it. Now, the truth is, even though, let's say you're the owner, so you can always sell it to a kohen, it'll be for a hefsid mu'at. You'll lose a little bit because obviously hektish meat is less expensive than chulin meat because of supply and demand. But nonetheless, that's not enough a reason to say batal works. Now, that's the Rishon's Seifa. Katanim is Reisha Tala. We learned, nonetheless, according to the Tanakama, that there's a din bittul when it comes to this meat. Now, that is actually, as Rashi says, is a kashan Reish Lakish, because Reish Lakish said on yesterday's daf, he says, Kol shedarko limanos, even things that are sometimes counted, just like meat, makes it into a davar chashuv and it can never be batal. So then how come, in this case, is it batal, according to Reish Lakish? So this is actually where we concluded, with Omer Rav Huna bin Nimucha. You're right. Normally, if it's a davar chashuv, because it's something which is even sometimes counted like meat, still would not be batal. However, why is it batal here, according to Rabbanan? It's because bin nimucha. Since the meat was dissolved, it's no longer davar chashuv, and that's why it's batal here. Verses 1 said, "Hachi my time Rabbi Yehuda." So the Reisha said that it doesn't work according to Rabbi Yehuda. Well, why not? It's dissolved. That should work. So as we continue to pay Beis with Aleph, Rabbi Yehuda l'tamei d'amri mid b'mino l'batal. Even though it's true that we're dealing with dissolved meat, it's still meat, and therefore it's mid b'mino, and mid b'mino is not batal, and that's the reason why he'll say it doesn't work. Aval lo nimuach mai lo tala. So therefore, what are we trying to say based on Reish Lakish? That if it's not dissolved meat, it won't be batal because he says that it's all totally on if it's a davar chashuv, and this meat is a davar chashuv. So adatani. So then, why does the Sefer say why does it mention a totally separate case of meat which is pure of a chatas niflig v'nisnibidida. Why don't you just stick with the same case and say, when do we say that it's batal is dafka b'sheni mucha? Is only when this meat has dissolved, and therefore it's not a davar chashiv. So why would you switch it to this other case where there's chulin meat, etc.? So and it's both tahar. So obviously it must be because it's not true. It must be that there is no difference. Namely, that even if it's not nimuach, even if it's not dissolved, it would still not. It should be the same din. So therefore, again, it's a question. Gemara says no taharos, but taharos adifle. The truth is, again, he does make a distinction whether meat is batal on a davar chashiv if it's dissolved or not. So instead of making that distinction, taharos, but taharos adifle. And the Sefer wanted to compare chulin and kodesh, but they were both tahar, and that's how it wanted to contrast it. Fine. Well, Reish Lakish, Maishno Reish Maishno Seifa. Now, according to Reish Lakish, what is the difference between the Reish and the Seifa? Again, if it's dissolved, it should be batal. So why in the Seifa does he say it's an issue? It must be that it's again the same situation. So we look in Rashi, skipping the middle to the middle. Mechlal the maida beigol the batal mishum hefsin muet b'chaticha maida de avinin kul kayin. You can give it all to the kayin. However, he gufa de raisa loichayshinan will hefsin muet. That's according to that shita. El reish lakish der mimidi de raisa will batal. He says that it's not going to be batal. V'hachim mishum de nimuach. The only reason why it's considered to be not chashiv is because it's dissolved meat. Su iser dila ubatla. So seifa amai lo tala. So then why don't we say, when it comes to the seifa, why do we say it's not batal? Holesili sur be'ain. The iser is not here. So Gemara gives three answers between the Reish and the seifa. Rav Sheisha, buried Rav Idi Reisha betumas mashkim the Rabbanon. The reason why the Reisha we're lenient and we say it's batal by this liquefied meat is because we say it's tumas mashkin. Tumas mashkin is the only din d'Rabbanan, and the seifa, which is not tumas mashkin, is a din d'Raisa. So that's why it's not batal. Look in Rashi. Omer Shish B'Red Ravidi. Skipping a couple lines. Shenitma chaticha alidei mashkin. So the meat became tummy through a liquid, mashkin tamein. Shenug b'kli, that it touched a kli. Now, midaraisa in mashkim matama kli. Now, normally midaraisa, only an avatoma should be able to matama a kli, which is to make into a rishon. Mashkim, oichan mashkim, or a sheni utoma. That's midarabanan. We end up saying that there's a concept that mashkin have the ability to matama kalim. However, that's only din d'Rabbanan. To make mashkin into a tchila, as the Gemara says elsewhere, into an av. So therefore, because it's only din d'Rabbanan, so therefore we're megel. However, the Seifa, Rashi says, Kadshim Lazar, Isser Deraisahu. For a non-Kohen to eat Kadshim, that's Isser Deraisa. Umidi Deraisa, Min Baminoi, Lahaitan Sphirle de Lo Batal, Vefil Shein Darkly Manais. So he says that doesn't make any difference. That it's not going to be batal, even if it's not something which is counted. Doesn't make any difference. It has nothing to do with the davar chashiv, not davar chashiv. It's still not going to be batal when it's min b'minai, when it's a din deraisa. So that's one distinction. Fine. So where it says 1 second. So if you're making a distinction between mashkin the rabbanan and the seifas, it became tummy. It's a tumah deraisa. So avol by this meat, and therefore non-kohen can't eat it. So avol tumah sheretz. When it comes to tumas sheretz, which in itself is a din deraisa, my lotala l'chara, that would also not be mavatal because it's a din deraisa like the seifa. The tiny seifa of a chaticha shel chatas tahirishnis aver b'mei chaticha shel chulin taharos lotala. Instead of the seifa talking about meat, that it became tamim meat to touching tahar meat, which is chatas, touching tahar meat, which is chulin, niflig v'lisni b'dida. Mention a more explanation, a case which has better explanation. and it'll explain more. B'medavar memoriam b'tumas mashkin. Maybe it's only by tumas mashkin, no, but tumas sheretz lo. In other words, we'll end up having a bigger chiddush to tell us that even when it comes to tumas sheretz, says Rashi, b'tuma b'tahara k'nenakat milsa v'asi maishna d'shavki tana l'milse l'minkat chulin v'kachim. Why would it want to mention chulin? Talk about tumas sheretz, and nonetheless it's also din deraisa. So when it says tahara b'taharos adifle, as we saw before, we want to mention tahar meat with tahar meat. Fine. Rabbi Omer Reisha Isser Lav and Seifa Isser Kares. So the Reisha is talking about why is it batal? It's because it's only a lav. Says Rashi, Tumas Basar Kachim Oichel B'Lav. That when it comes to meat, which is tameh of Kachim, eating is a lav. As the pasuk says of a basar sher yiga b'chol tameh. The Seifa is talking about Kachim b'chulin asili de kares. The acholhu b'tumas haguf. So in this situation, eating it b'tumas haguf b'kares. While a person, their body is tameh, that is an iser kares. As the pasuk says, nefesh asher soichel basar oilam b'shenimucha. Rashi says it. We're still talking about it's dissolved, but doesn't make any difference. We're still not going to say it's batal because we're dealing with a potential iser kares over here. Okay. And Rashi has another lashon. Okay, so that's the second answer. I behold Rabba hudi Amar kol b'deraisa loishna iser lav loishna iser kares kasha. Now, according to him, he said there really shouldn't be any difference between iser lav and iser kares. So that in itself is a kasha, but not strong enough that we're going to throw that answer out. Ravashi attempts a third answer to distinguish the Reisha and the Seifa, which we're going to end up saying is not correct. Why? So the Reisha is something in which it's not mutter. It's a davar shein lo matirin. It can never be eaten. However, the Seifa mishum dahavili davar sheish lo matirin. The Seifa, it's not batal because it's a davar sheish lo matirin, because a kohen is allowed to eat it. Where it says v'chol davar sheish lo matirin, I feel b'alfol batal. Something in which eventually will be allowed is never batal. I v'had Rav Ashi b'dusihi. This actually has to be a mistake. Laman. So after who will be eventually allowed to eat this meat? Ilakayin mishashari. He's allowed to eat it now anyway. It's not that it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin. Eventually you could eat it. It's allowed to be eaten now. The Yisrael aser, and for Yisrael it's always aser. Eloha Rav Ashi b'dusahi. It's a mistake. If you look at Rashi, quotes the beginning of Masechtas Beya, davar sheyesh lo matirin lo batal kagayin dimishari lo machar. Something which will be allowed tomorrow. Loman yasir le hashta. Could go in Be'er Shanol to be Yom Tov. So the beginning of the Masechtas Beya talks about an egg that was born on Yom Tov. So in that situation, there's a discussion what the status of that egg is, and perhaps the reason why it's not allowed to be eaten is because it's a davar sheish matirin. Don't eat it on Yom Tov, where it's questionable. Eat it tomorrow. So even if, let's say, it's going to be mixed in with many things, which we normally would say is batal, but we may not say that if you could do things better. When you can do things better tomorrow, then do things better tomorrow. Okay, so but again, this cannot be a situation of davar sheish matirin. It's question 9. Ketzad truma batal b'chulin v'harihu davar sheish matirin litin l'kayin shemota b'truma. And the answer is it's not davar sheish matirin because he was allowed to eat it anyway. He was allowed to eat it anyway. It says yesh lo matirin hainu sheish heter l'mi sheneser. Avol kan hakayin ve'oil muneser mi sheneser in lo heter. Okay, as we said. That was also question TB6. Elohad Rav Ashi Bedusi. So Sav Rav Yochanan Truma Bizman Azed Deraisa. So we actually had a dispute in previous daf that what is the status of Truma Bizman Azed nowadays. So according to the Shita Rav Yochanan, he says that Truma is still Deraisa. That is, of course, his opinion, that Truma Bizman Azed is only the Rabbanan. So now we have this problem if you hold this Deraisa. V'sani, we learn, and this Gemara is quoted in many places, including the first parak in Psachim, Shtei kupos, if you have these two baskets, Acha shel chulin v'acha shel truma. So one basket has chulin food, one has truma food. V'lifneihem shtei sayin, Acha shel chulin v'acha shel truma. And you have these two measures of food, one is chulin and truma. V'nafal elu b'toch elu, hara elu mutarin. So one fell into one, the other one fell into the other. It didn't commingle. The question is, which one's which? So we say that they're both mutter. Why? Sha'ani omer, because I say, truma l'tech truma nafla, v'chulin b'tech chulin nafla. Now, even though you don't know that for a fact, but nonetheless, we're going to say, yeah, it's a possibility that that's perhaps what indeed happened. And therefore, it's allowed. So the Gemara says, V'yamar reish lakish v'hush l'tech truma shnafel chulin b'tech chulin shnafel. V'yamar reish lakish, Reish Lakish says, v'hush rabbi chulin al truma. Now, the only time we're going to say this concept of Shani Omer, which is again a tremendous kula, is where the majority is chulin. There's more chulin over truma. So this way, even what fell in the chulin, if it was indeed, let's say, truma, we still want a rove of the chulin, so the rove will be batal. So the only time this will work, according to him, is only the situation where there's more chulin. So even Luyitzur, that it didn't hit the chulin box, but if in fact there was only a small amount of truma in there originally, and you threw in chulin, and it's really chulin together with truma, but since it's the majority of chulin, then it's okay. Now this is a tremendous kula of Rav Yochanan. He says that even if there isn't a majority of chulin, we're still lenient. Now, Bishlam Reish Lakish Ksavar B'Rabanan Nami Ribuyahud B'inan. So he's strict. Even though Truma he holds Bismana says the Rabbanan, nonetheless, he still requires a rove, that there has to be a majority of chulin in this Truma box. Avul Rabbi Yochanan Kasha. Rabbi Yochanan is a very strong Kasha. If in fact he holds Truma Bismana says the Raisa, how could he be so makel and allow this to work, even though it doesn't even need to have the majority of chulin? So Hamani Rabbanan he. So he says, you're right. This actually is according to the Shita of the Rabbanan. Why? The Rabbanan who holds actually that it's only a din Rabbanan. That's only Truma Bismana says the Rabbanan. But you're right. According to him, it actually would not be the Rabbanan. As we continue Pei Beis Amud Beis, the Amri Rabbi Yosi, and I hold like the Shita of Rav Yosi. Who's that? The Sanyam Beseder Oilam Asher Yarsho Vasecha V'Yirishta. So what is this pasuk coming to tell you? Yerusha Rishayna V'Shniya Yeshahen V'Shlishus Ein Lahen. The Yerusha Rishayna, says Rashi, which was in the days of Yeshua, that was the Yerusha. And so too the Shniya and the second Yerusha, which had to do with when Ezra came back and was instrumental in the building of the second Beis HaMikdash. And then Rashi says, they should go Golos Rishayna, but the Kedushas Aretz. When the first, when they left, the Kedushas Aretz left, but then the Shniya came, and he was therefore Yarshed again. However, Shlishus Ein Lahem, says Rashi, Kolomer Lo Boila Mehedar. It does not need to return. Why? The Yerusha Oimedesi, because that Yerusha remains. The Ashmeinan Haikra, the little Batal Kedushas Aretz Begolos Titus. That when Titus Harasha destroyed the second Beis HaMikdash, the Kedusha never left. Therefore, according to this, Shlishus Ein Lahem means you do not need to reinstate the Kedusha because the Kedusha is always there. What does that mean? It means that Truma must be, according to him, Deraisa Bisman as a Shlishus Ein Lahem. Rabbi Yochanan, Man Tana Seder Oilam Rabbi Yosi. And therefore, again, he holds like Rabbi Yosi. This shita, this opinion of the mixture of the chulin to the truma, he doesn't hold like, because you're right, that would be a kula that he doesn't hold up. Okay. So v'savar Rabbi Yochanan b'Rabbanan will be in and ribua. So now the question is, according to the shita of Rabbi Yochanan, the question is, when we talked about this case before of these baskets, he says that it works. The question is, because Shani Yomi, must be, I put the chulin, the truma. But then he says that it has to be, Reish Lakish says, it has to be that there's more chulin anyway that would have been put in the truma would be batal. According to him, he says, doesn't need that. If you have a mikvah, which is the exact minimum requirement of 40 sa, now there's a din of nasan sa v'natal sa, kosher, that you're allowed to remove certain liquid as long as it's replaced. So you can remove mikvah water and you can put in other liquids. But you nasan saw, first you have to put the more in, and then you take a saw out. Now what are you putting in? So Rashi says, Gabi shar mashkin, may peros, temed, shehichmitz, koi. You're putting in all these different liquids, fruit juices, or this temed, this type of liquid which became vinegary, etc. So Rashi says, "V'havilu arboyim v'chad kulin ruyin." So what ends up happening is you have 40, then you put in one, and then you take it out. So you can keep doing this l'chayra for a very long time. How long? Rabbi Yehuda bar Shila Meralasi Rav Yochanan ad rubo. You can only do it up until the majority. My love, dinishtar rubo. So this is a question. It must be that you must remain a majority of kosher mikvah water. You can't do more than that. It has to be that the rove always stays. So you can keep doing this process, let's say it's 40 sah, 19 times. So what's the problem? So according to the sheet of Rav Yochanan, he holds that when it comes to mixtures, it's not necessary that you have to have rove of the proper thing there. But that's what he said. You don't have to have rove chulin in the truma. So why over here is it required? So the first answer is it's not required. Well, dulo nishko rubo. It means you cannot remove a majority. You can't take out 51% of the megashamim, of the mikvah water. But 50-50 is okay. You don't need rove to stay. But you just can't have rove in the other direction. So that's not, it's not a problem. The case of the chul and the truma, there's more reason to be makel. So in the case of chulin, you don't need rove, only there. Since maybe the chulin fell in chulin, so it's possible. But normally you need rove even on a din d'Rabbanan, like the case of a mikvah. Question 10, also TA5. Beis kupos achas shel chulin v'achas shel truma. V'lifneihem beis soyin achas shel chulin v'chul. V'novu elu toch elu mutarin. Long question here. Rabbi Yochanan avlapi shelo ruba chulin al hatruma. Ma'ishna midetnan. How's it different from what we learned about a mikvah sheishmo mem sa mechuvanais nasan sa v'natal sa? V'yom Rabbi Yochanan ad rubo. So the answer is, I'll just say how he writes it. But mikvah hainu delo nishko rubo. You can't take out a majority of rainwater. Delo be'inan de nishta rubo. You don't need to have remaining a majority of rainwater. Or bekupo shani de iko meimer shani oimer l'chein lo be'inan roiv. Okay. Tanan. So now we're going to go and explain our Mishnah about an androgynous. So an androgynous is an individual, as we saw in Pei Aleph and Aleph, who has simanim of a zachar and a nekeva, and therefore it's a suffix exactly what their status is. So the Mishnah said, androgynous noise of a lo nisa. So the way that we read it right up front is an androgynous who can get married to a woman since he has a sad zachars. However, if a man marries him, or a man marries an androgynous, I should say, it's not a marriage, because he has the sad zachros, and it's harihu kibal hazachar. Rashi says it's almost like mishkav zachar, and therefore that would not work. Rabbi Eliezer Omer in our Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, androgynous chayavam skila kazachar. He says you're going to be chayav skila just like a zachar, and the Gemara is going to explain what this is talking about. Okay. So we're going to see a little bit of this today. It's going to continue in tomorrow's daf. So we'll just see this to the bottom over here. Tanan, androgynous noise. It says an androgynous can get married, which sounds like l'chatchila, that we have no problem with it, and he's allowed to marry this woman. It says Rashi, Tanan, androgynous noise l'chatchila, alma, zachar malihu. It sounds like he's really a male. The kashler Reish Lakish, the oimer ein meichel b'chaz of a shaik. Now, according to Reish Lakish, he says that an androgynous is not the chaz of a shaik. Now, if he's a Kohen, And apparently he should be allowed to, because why not? If we're saying that he's 100% able to get married, he must be has the din of a zachar. So why should he not be able to eat the chaz v'shaik? So my answer is Tani. You should instead read im nasa. It doesn't mean l'chatchila, but rather it's b'diavad. Rashi is the boy gita mine. If they do get married, we don't want them to remain married. It means if they do it b'diavad, then he has to divorce her. Mishum safik zachar sfeikahu. That's why he can't eat chaz v'shaik. But it's at least enough of a suffix that we will say that he has to give a get. That's not what it says. My aval lo nisa. What does that mean? Aval lo nisa. That he shouldn't marry a man can't marry the androgynous. El my nisa diavad. Noise nami diavad. It's talking about again b'diavad, and nonetheless we require a get to be given. So Amri lo nosel lo noisel chatchila mashma. When it says that he's marrying a woman, when the androgynous is marrying a woman, that means l'chatchila. Avolo nisa diavad namulo. When it's talking about the man marrying the androgynous, that even b'diavad not. I have a tiny sefer, belezer omer androgynous chayavnu of skila kazachar. Now, as we quoted, what does that mean? That androgynous is going to be chayav skila just like a male. So Mechlal the Tanakama Sfukim Safkale. It sounds like it's a suffix according to the Rabbanon, right? So you can't tell me, oh no, if a man marries androgynous, even b'diavad not. But in the case above, it's l'chatchila. Now, according to the Shita Rabbi Eliezer, he says that it doesn't work at all. And therefore, in fact, it's like he's mamish a total zachar. Now, if he says he's totally a zachar, it must be that he holds that it's a suffix. The Tanakh holds it's a suffix. No, bin lomar misha pshitale. According to both of them, it's definitely a zachar. The question is, would there be skill on two ends? Damar savar chayavnu of skill mishnei mekomos, mar savar kazachar. What does that mean? Says Rashi, afil mnekuvasai, even for being a female. The time of farsha kaman mikra b'shmaitin. Was Relezer savar kazachar. Bimkoim zachors in. In other words, bimkoim nikvos loy. The only time, and this is again needs more work, we'll discuss this more tomorrow. Rabbi Lezer holds only kazachar, only bimkom zachros, that if the tashmish took place bimkom zachros in the anus by a male, that's when they're going to be chayav skila. Bimkom nakvos lo, in the place of the nakvos of a woman by her private area, then they would not be chayav. So that's what it means. B'shteim and kaimais. It doesn't mean in two cities. It means two places on this androgynous. According to the Tanakama, they say that you'll be chayav in either having tashmish with this androgynous on either place. But according to the other, it's only kazachar. It's only when a person has tashmish b'mokum zachros, but not b'mkoim nekevus. Okay, well, this will be discussed at greater length as the Gemara continues with this discussion in tomorrow's daf. Adkan.